I've been an avid reader my entire life, even from childhood, but I typically don't read a book more than once because a good story always seems to stick with me. With that being said, there are two books that I've read more than once just for the pure enjoyment of it. As a child, it was The Call of the Wild by Jack London. As an adult, it was Bad Alice by Cynthia Lee. Bad Alice by Cynthia Lee, independently published, 2020. It's 1985 and the satanic panic has set in. Alice Eyre keeps seeing things. Little girls who disappeared years before, characters from 1980s TV shows. Sometimes the visions talk to her. Sometimes they tell her things. An outcast, everyone in her small southern town thinks she and her mother are witches. Judge Hand, a figure both feared and revered, returns to town. He's there to rid the town of its satanic underground. He means to finish something he started years before. He's here to burn all of the witches. Alice will have to use her considerable cunning and resourcefulness to save herself and those she loves. That description is what sold me on this book. Actually, I was sold after the very first line. It's 1985 and the satanic panic has set in. Just stop the press and take my money now. But in my humble opinion, the blurb doesn't do the book justice at all. Miss Lee weaves this story with a theme that I could have never dreamed of. This is definitely a writer that makes me kick myself for not thinking of these ideas first. Alice is a high school student whose main goal there is to just do her time and get out. She lives with her eccentric artist mother, who by Alice's own account is completely insane. Sure, Alice suffers from strange visions and hallucinations of her own, but to me, her account of her mother's mental stability is spot on, as strange as that may sound. Talk about your blind leading the blind scenario. They sustain themselves on the sale of her mother's artwork and old family wealth in an old plantation home that has been in the family for generations. When a mysterious preacher-type character shows up in the town after being gone for almost 20 years, the locals flock to his message of an underground cult lurking in every small town of the country, their own town being no exception. To Alice, this is the stupidest thing she had ever heard, until she finds herself right in the middle of it all. Alice's best friend Marnie tries her best to keep Alice grounded, but Marnie's meek and easily influenced personality makes that near impossible. Not to mention Marnie's mother's involvement with the preacher himself, Judge Hand. I could go on and on about this book, but I'm struggling with what all to say without giving away any spoilers. Let's just say that if someone were to make this into a movie, I'd be pissed if it were anyone other than the likes of Guillermo del Toro. Let's think 1960s or 70s horror movie style with a heavy splash of Alice in Wonderland in the most wonderful and bizarre ways possible. There are a few typos and one slight continuity issue that I noticed, but they are largely in the shadow of a great story and did not hinder me at all. And you want to talk about setting the tone? The first chapter does that perfectly for me. You get an idea of exactly what you're getting into right away. The reader is immediately hit with some strange, creepy, disturbing lines, and from kids no less. That left me excited to turn each page for more. The main character Alice is totally relatable for me. Her personality was a lot like I was in high school, and her attitude reminds me a lot of a character from my own book series. Apart from Alice, one of my favorite characters was Maylene. The short interactions between Alice and Maylene were hidden gems throughout the whole story. And speaking of hidden gems, anyone old enough to remember the 80s are sure to pick up on a lot of throwback type hints that will surely make you smile. I was able to identify a lot with the story since I am from close to the same part of the country as this book takes place in. Also, the plot is tied back to a religious school for troubled youths. I've explained the plot to a few people before and they always come back with something like, "That's a little out there, don't you think?" Bro, I graduated from a private Christian school. It's not as far-fetched as you might think. This is the first book I've read by Cynthia Lee, but I can promise you that will change once my current to-be-read pile gets a little more under control. If Bad Alice is any indication as to the style of all of the other stories, then I'm sure I'm in for a wild ride. I've already purchased Miss Lee's entire catalog. With just this one piece of work, Miss Lee quickly shot up to one of my favorite authors of all time, and I'm hoping that more of her works will keep that momentum going. As always, I'll post a link to the book and Miss Lee's social media links in the description below. Until next time, find yourself a good book and enjoy breaking away from reality. I hope to see you here again soon.